So the Kansas City Chiefs have been to 3 straight Super Bowls and lost a Super Bowl. However, the question has become, how long can they keep doing this? Is the dynasty going to come to a close? I think most people rationally will say as long as you have Mahomes, you're going to have a shot regardless. But of course, football is a team sport. And so just saying you have Mahomes, you're going to be a Super Bowl contender year in and year out would probably be unfair. So let's talk about the entire roster right now, what issues they might have coming forward, and how they can potentially fix them. Also, real quick, before I get too much further into this video, I'll mention that I do have a movie channel. If you like watching movies, want to hear my thoughts on movies, you can check that out. The link is in the description below. I do like movie reviews and like some tier lists and some other movie-related topics, so check that out if it seems like your kind of thing. But yeah, let's get back to the video. Let's start off with this chart because I think to talk about where they can go from here, first we have to talk about what they're currently at. This is where they rank in terms of PFF grades across the board in specific positional categories. And listen, we can agree or disagree about some of these. I certainly think the passing, even with Mahomes maybe having a down year, was a lot better than 13th this season. I believe that is factoring in playoffs and the Super Bowl performance, but still, I think it was better than that. However, a couple I think that are worth noting and that I kind of do agree with. First, receiving was underwhelming this year. It was 20th. We'll get to that. You also have pass blocking, which was 13th. But keep in mind, that's with 3 really good offensive linemen. The interior, Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith was great, although Trey Smith is an upcoming free agent. We'll talk about the tackles in a second as well. And then coverage, which you see was the strength of this team according to PFF. I actually think there's some issues there as well. So those are the 3 things that I think I really want to get into. First, these are the tackles that the Chiefs had. One is actually a guard who's just, for some reason, listed as a tackle there. And all the way to the right is their PFF grades. To the left is where they ranked in terms of PFF grades. Essentially, they went into this season without a left tackle. One guy who's not on this list that I think I accidentally cropped out was Kingsley Sumatea, who was a second-round pick who, quite frankly, just didn't play very well. And so that was kind of their plan, is hoping he worked out. And once he didn't work out, they were in a world of hurt. You had Wanya Morris, who was not great, and they eventually benched him, put Joe Thuney, the great guard, at left tackle, and then had Mike Caliendo at the bottom of the screen play guard, but he wasn't really great there at guard, and then Thuney was kind of up and down, playing out of position at the tackle position. You see DJ Humphries is also on this list. He only played a little bit. They signed him off the street and ultimately decided to stick with Thuney instead of him. And then Jawan Taylor, the other guy, he's the right tackle who they pay $20 million a year for. PFF isn't crazy about his game. I'm not crazy about his game. There are people who like him, but as a whole, I think issue number 1, they have to get a tackle. That's something they have to address. They can't go into this season just hoping that somebody takes a step forward. They have to bring somebody else in, I think. As for the receiving core, I actually think that this is a little bit more interesting because there is a player they're going to get this season. They basically have a free agent that they're adding, which is Rashee Rice, who got injured early on this year. You hope he comes back from the injury, but again, you see the PFF grade all the way to the right. He was by far and away their best player when he was there. Xavier Worthy also just consistently got better week in and week out. Early on in the season, he was kind of a gadget player. By the end of the year, he looked like a legit number 2 option. But for Rashee Rice and Worthy, they have a couple good receivers. I'd still like them to add another player. Travis Kelce isn't getting any younger, but at the same time, Kelce and Noah Gray are still, that's a good tight end tandem as well. This past year, you just hope you hope Kelce comes back, doesn't retire, and then is still good. So the receiving core should just get better even if you do nothing. You would maybe like to at least draft a guy like in the 4th round or something, see if they can be a number 3 option, because Justin Watson, okay, he can be a fine wide receiver 5. Juju Smith-Schuster can be a fine depth player, but they need a little more than that. Maybe Marquise Brown's that guy and they bring him back. I don't know, but that's where they're at right now. And then also the corners. I said I wanted to bring this up. So one of the moves they made last offseason was L'Jarius Sneed. They traded him away because he wanted a big contract. And so I believe they actually gave him the big contract, but then traded him away, if I remember correctly, to Tennessee. So they actually get an extra draft pick in this upcoming draft, that's good. But the reason why they decided to make that move is they trusted their corners would be able to handle the extra workload. Trent McDuffie was an all-pro at the slot. They moved him out wide. He was still very good there, although I do like him a little more in the slot, to be honest, but he's still very good outside corner. I think he was second-team all-pro this year, so very good. Again, he's fantastic. The other players, though, is kind of where it gets a little more questionable. You have Jamari Conner and Jalen Watson. Watson really was the number 2 guy. I should mention that the numbers all the way to the right, that is the snap count this season. Watson did get banged up a little bit this year. Joshua Williams is interesting because he was someone who started the year as a, their third corner, and essentially when he came back from injury was just a special teams guy in the playoffs. He did not play in the playoffs at the corner position, so I'm kind of confused about that a little bit because Nazeez Johnson was not exactly spectacular according to PFF, according to my eye test. And the thing about Jalen Watson as well that I want to mention, again, I call it how I see it here. He did not have to go up against a ton of great number 2 corners. You look at the Chiefs this season, the only real time they played a great number 2 corner was the Super Bowl, and Devonta Smith burned Jalen Watson on that long pass. You also saw Watson struggle on it, another long pass. So maybe it was just a bad game. I don't know, but that's something that I think you did see a hit. And again, it's still a good coverage unit, but let's keep in mind, 2 years ago when they won the Super Bowl, the strength of their team was their coverage unit. Their offense did not get going until the fourth quarter of that Super Bowl, but they were okay because they covered so well. Against Baltimore, the Chiefs scored 2 touchdowns, only had a field goal for the rest of the game, but they won because their defense played so well, and obviously Mahomes made the plays when he had to. The strength of their team was coverage. They've gone from great to good, and I think that's hurt them. Again, it's hurt them to the point where they lost the Super Bowl instead of winning the Super Bowl. Still pretty good stuff. But let's talk about why the Chiefs have been so successful. And those are the issues. That's why they lost the Super Bowl. But let's talk about why they've been so successful. Obviously, Mahomes and Andy Reid, that helps. When you have the best coach quarterback combo in the league, you're going to be competitive. But of course, we've seen teams with the best coach and quarterback combo not win Super Bowls year after year. So what else got them to 3 straight Super Bowls, winning 2 of them? It's how well they've drafted. So let's go through the list. So this was, these guys are about to become free agents. So this was the 2020 NFL draft, if I'm doing my math correctly. You see Nick Bolton, who's been a great player for them. Creed Humphrey, who they've re-signed now. He's been a great player. Noah Gray, as I said, really good number 2 tight end. Might be Kelsey's replacement whenever that day comes. And Trey Smith in the 6th round, who's been a great guard for them. All these guys are about to get paid now. So you got 4 great years of production out of these guys where you didn't have to pay them a ton of money. None of them were first rounders, right? They didn't pick in the first round that year. I mean, that's good stuff, right? And then the next year, they even one-upped that draft with Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis in the first round. Sky Moore was effective that year, at least as a role player, hasn't done much since then. But Brian Cook is a starter for them. Leo Chenal gets a lot of playing time. Joshua Williams, we talked about, has gotten playing time, not so much in the playoffs this year. Jalen Watson is their number 2 corner. Isaiah Pacheco gets playing time, and Nazeez Johnson at safety, who's now a corner. He gets a good amount of playing time. So these are a lot of players that, again, they get that cheap production of rookie contracts. So you still get another year of all these guys. That's the good news. But you have to pay all the guys I just talked about. And then the following year, you're going to have to pay all of these guys. That's where the issue is going to come in. And for a dynasty to keep going, you have to keep drafting well. And the past 2 drafts just haven't been at that level. Going over here, they've had some nice picks. I mean, Felix Nduke-Uzomah I don't think has been worth a first-round pick. That's my opinion on this. He doesn't get a ton of playing time for them. He has shown flashes, but that's just where he's at. Rashee Rice has been great. That's a slam dunk at the number 2 pick. But again, Jamari Conner's been an effective 4th rounder. They don't have no picks, but just when you go to the past 2 drafts, which have been dominant, these ones, not quite as much. Last year's draft, which again, things can turn around, right? There's sometimes it just takes a couple years for guys to get going, so who knows? But at least as of right now, Worthy's looked like a really nice pick at the end of the first round. Kingsley Sumatea was unplayable despite the fact that they were horrible in that spot. Jaden Hicks as a 4th-round defensive back, he was a starter at safety for them, so like that's a nice pick. So like I said, they've had some nice picks, but it's just not been at that dominant level, and it's gone back to being like good instead of great. And then this chart's interesting too. This is their cap space the next 3 years. Mahomes' contract is really kicking in this year. That's worth noting. So for next 3 years, this is their projected cap space. $11 million this year, not a ton. And they don't really have players they could cut except for Travis Kelce, and they're not going to cut him. So even if he was playing horrible, I don't think they would do that. They would maybe say, hey, could you retire or something, or can we restructure something? They would never ask him to. They would never just outright cut a legend like that, I don't think. In 2026, $77 million, which is not bad, but keep in mind all the players I just mentioned that they have to either re-sign or have a 5th-year option, which is still paying money, a good amount of money to them, or franchise tagging, which is still a good amount of money, right? Again, Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Brian Cook, Leo Chenal, Jalen Watson, Aziz Johnson, Isaiah Pacheco. Those are guys you have to pay, along with the ones that we just talked about, Nick Bolton and Noah Gray and Trey Smith, who they either have to pay or find replacements for. Quite frankly, they just won't be able to re-sign all of those players unless they really kick the can down the road, which wouldn't be a smart thing when you have Mahomes, who is just turning 30 right now. I should mention as well, though, in 2026, they can get an extra $20 million. Jawan Taylor's contract is cuttable at that point. I just don't see any way you would. Again, I don't see why they signed the contract in the first place. Maybe they like Jawan Taylor. I do think that you make a move at that point and try and just get a little cheaper there while still maintaining the same level of play is what I think you could do there. 2027, they have a ridiculous amount of money in cap space, but it's because they're paying nobody. I'll just overlay this over the whole screen, but you see, these are the 12 players that are currently under contract for 2027. Now, you might think I mean like these are 12 of the most highest paid players or the most important players. No, there are only 12 players, and one of these is a void year, DeAndre Hopkins. So it's actually just 11 players that they have under contract a couple years down the line. So okay, that's where they're at. What does this all mean? What is our final takeaway through all this? With Mahomes and Reed, the reality is their baseline is still being a team that could win a Super Bowl in a year. That's just how I view them. Even if they don't have a great coverage unit in a couple years, they still can make that happen. They've pretty much had good teams every year Mahomes has been there. But like if they get a worse team around them, Mahomes and Reed are so good, they're still going to be a competitive team. I don't see this team missing the playoffs at any point. But the question is not, can they continue to compete to try and win Super Bowls? The question is, can they continue to be like the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl year in and year out? Can they continue to make the conference championship game and every year and make the Super Bowl most years? And that's going to come down to, can they continue to draft well? At the end of the day, you only have so much money you can spend. And they've drafted so well these past couple of years that they've had a lot of cheap production. It's not just these star players. It's also getting players that are role players. That's what the Rams did when they won a Super Bowl, is they had like half their roster on rookie deals, just like they weren't the stars, but they were solid players. So can the Chiefs continue to be hyper competitive? They need to have another draft like they did, with the Trent McDuffie draft or the Trey Smith draft. If they can continue to do that, yes, they will continue to be competitive and will continue to compete for Super Bowls. If not, they'll still be competitive. They'll still have a shot every year, but they might not have this success. The good news, though, for Chiefs fans, which is seemingly bad news for everybody else, I think that they still have at least one more year of hyper-competitive football. Even if they lose Trey Smith, they can replace him. There's things you can do. They might take a small step back, but I don't see any major steps back happening until at least 2 years from now. So that's kind of where I'm at. But again, can they keep this going for another 10 years, which people are talking about? It is going to be difficult, but it's not going to be impossible, and I'm not going to count this organization out. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.